Day 2 of free agency is pretty much in the books. Big moves, big players, big times. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and this is the Times New Roman of podcasts. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As sports slow down around the summertime right now, well, FanDuel's got something for you. Every day, every customer gets either a boost or a bonus. All day, all summer long. Head to fanduel.com/lockedon to learn more. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. So thumb it up and double bang and leave all your comments down below. That will go a long way to making me feel good. And that's a hard thing to do. Okay, we are here looking at free agency day 2. I'll tell you when I am recording this. The time is, as I do my calculations, 11 p.m. Eastern, Monday, the 1st of July, United States time. So any signing that happens after this, I'll talk about it tomorrow. So let's talk about the ones that we haven't talked about that did happen over the last 24 hours-ish. And we are starting to slow down now across free agency. There's not that many guys that are going to be super impact players left. There's still teams with massive gaps and holes giggity in their lineups that are going to have to do things about it. And we'll see which direction they go, but there is still a lot of things to happen across the NBA landscape. The big one was, of course, we got word of some of this yesterday, and then we got word of it very late, 3 a.m. Eastern, I think it was, that Paul George, well, we knew that he was leaving the Clippers, but now we know that he did join the Philadelphia 76ers, 4-year contract, $212 million. I believe there's a player option, but I'm not sure on that. The Sixers are an interesting team, and they're going to feature a lot, so are the Clippers, in this show today. George is a perennial second-round-ish sort of player who can be a first-round guy. The question here is going to be, does this impact Embiid, and what does it do to Maxi? Embiid, maybe. We shave a little bit off the top. We know the story. Big threes, it's usually the top 2 guys who are pretty much okay, and the third guy often takes a big hit. But who is the third guy? Is it Tangles? Is it Maxi? Or is it Paul George? I'm not really sure. Maxi can have his value through passing, but Embiid and Paul George are not non-passers. They will have the ball a lot. George is a pretty malleable player. He can sort of fit off ball. He doesn't have to have sky-high usage. This has a chance of being one of the situations where the big 3, we don't have the one specific loser. We might have a little bit off the top for Embiid. We might have a little bit off the top for Maxi. And remember, Paul George played with Kawhi and Harden last year. The thing to remember with that is that Harden took the big step back, so George was able to maintain decent usage. I don't think that George maintains that same level of usage because I don't think that Maxi takes as big of a step back as what Harden did last season, but there are going to be adjustments here. And of course, there's always the ever-present worry about Paul George and his knees, although most of the injuries that Paul George has suffered have been very fluke instances. The other thing with the Sixers is that I don't know who the hell else is starting on this team. Maxi, yes. George, yes. Embiid, yes. And Drummond's a backup. Eric Gordon signed. Is he a starter? I don't know. Can they actually finally convince Paul George, the 6'11" man, to play power forward? Because they don't have any power forwards. Their 2 starting power forwards last year are both gone. We'll talk about them today. Do we get Nick Nurse turning Paul Reed finally into Pascal Siakam, or is Paul Reed going to go? Who is the 4? I don't know. There is a lot of water to go under the bridge still with the way that the Sixers round out their squad. Because at the moment, that player isn't there. I know someone will say, well, Josh Kelly Oubre is a 4. He's not. He's a 3/2. He's back with the team. So it's Oubre, it's George, it's Maxi, it's Embiid. Who the hell's the other starter? At the moment, it has to be Eric Gordon, but they don't have any players on their team. Still a lot happening there in Philadelphia. We're waiting for some other things to fill out. The next probably biggest news, just in terms of legacy and impact across the NBA, not that he's the second best player to change teams, because he isn't, Klay Thompson. We know that Klay was having some real problems all through the season. He openly said it. Hey, I don't like how bad I'm playing. I don't like this contract negotiation stuff going on. It's impacting me. Coming off the bench is impacting me. I'm not the same player. It's making me turn into a complete dickhead. He basically said that, right? And he just did not play very well. And I know he shot okay towards the end of the year, but this is not the same Klay. And then the Warriors were, not offering the contract that he wanted. He felt disrespect, so he's gone. One of the longest serving trios in the NBA ever, or maybe not ever, but at least modern times, absolutely, is broken up. Klay does get to the Dallas Mavericks in a sign and trade. Now, I have seen reported that Josh Green is a part of this sign and trade, but I haven't seen anything official on that Josh Green would be going to Charlotte in their three-way sign and trade, but I don't know that for sure. All I know is there's a couple of seconds heading towards Golden State. Klay goes for 3 years and $50 million dues to Dallas. Now, they signed Najee Marshall 3 years, 27 yesterday, and we thought Marshall would step in and start in place of Derek Jones Jr., who head to the Clippers. But now, absolutely not. It is going to be Klay. So Marshall comes off the bench. We don't care about that for fantasy. PJ Washington takes a back seat to be the fourth usage option, and that obviously hurts him. But what about with Klay? So Klay obviously had been able to succeed in the past alongside Steph and alongside Durant. But as a general rule, he has been the number 2. But next to Steph. Even his usage last year was pretty high. Now he is very clearly the 3. He doesn't bring assists or rebounds or steals or blocks. His numbers are inconsistent and he never gets to the line. I will venture to say that Klay Thompson is he draftable? I don't think so. But it's very early. Other things can happen, but I don't think that that'll necessarily be the case. And honestly, I think there are going to be games where Klay does not finish. He's not in the closing group. It'll be Marshall because Klay cannot defend at that level anymore. And he'll probably play 31, 32 minutes a night. But yeah, we saw some pretty bad signs. In fact, we saw this graphic debut. Like, he was terrible a lot of the time. And he finished it off with what? Was it 0 of 11 or 1 of 11 in the playoff game? It's early, but I don't think he'll be draftable, and I don't think he hits 20 points a game, and that makes it really, really tough to see him as a fantasy value player. Maybe he's rejuvenated. Maybe revenge game Klay doesn't exist. Maybe he's out to prove doesn't exist. Like, this stuff doesn't happen. And I think the situation's actually worse. In terms of Golden State, well, I'll talk about the replacements over there in a second. The Clippers replacements, that whole roster's up in the air. Talk about the Paul George stuff. We'll get to that later. But it's very hard to nail down what happens replacement-wise in a lot of spots because there's other signings and moves that still need to be made with so many of these teams. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Sports slow down across the summer. The NBA has obviously got stuff going on, but no games. But we've got Summer League coming up. Major League Baseball's rolling, coming up to the All-Star game there. WNBA, PGA, NASCAR, disc golf, it's all happening. FanDuel knows, though, that things are a little bit slower. So they're going to do something for everybody. All customers, not new customers, not bonus bet winning customers, new customers, all customers, every customer. Every day, a bonus or a boost, every day, all summer long. So head across to fanduel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. So I'd say that they're the two biggest names, players, Paul George and Klay Thompson, that changed teams. The next best player who changed teams? Well, it's probably the big fella, Isaiah Hartenstein, going from the Knicks over to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Just quickly on the Knicks, it's going to have to mean that it's Mitchell Robinson and Jericho Sims there. It has to. It's not going to be Ariel Hukporti, as much as I think he's an interesting player. So that does help Robinson's value, but we know what Robinson is, right? Maybe they do something else in that spot. Maybe they do play, given the fact that Bridges is there. Maybe they do play more small ball with Randall. But I feel like Tom Thibodeau would rather cut off his own glands than play Julius Randle as center. Remember the Julius Randle Obi Toppin lineup, which was a plus 40 and played 3 possessions in 3 years? We'll see. But Hartenstein's gone. So let's talk about what his deal was. 3 years, $87 million. You might think that's a lot. Hartenstein's actually really good. You know I've been talking about him for a very long time on this podcast. The thing that gets me now is that's $29 million a year. That's obviously a lot of money. The Thunder needed to do that to, I guess, bring him across. But this is the number one team in the West getting better. Much like they did getting Alex Caruso in. They're in now. But does Hartenstein start? Because if he does, that obviously means Chet Holmgren plays at the 4. Now, they can play together. They can both shoot. They can both pass. They can both defend. They can both protect the rim. Maybe Hartenstein's the 4. Whatever. It means Jalen Williams, the Bronco, plays a more reasonable position at the 3. But it means one of Lou Dort or Alex Caruso is a bench player. It could be Caruso. They can keep his minutes down that way. You know that I don't think Dort is long for a starting role long term. That's my view on Lou Dort. But this is an interesting thing. Now, does this mean Hartenstein's a 30-minute a night player? I would say probably not. Chet only played, 30 or 31 a night this season. I think Hartenstein's a 27-minute a night player, but that covers all their center position stuff. They can play together. They cover the 48 minutes at center without worrying about Pig Williams getting into minutes there. And it enables them way more flexibility. This is not the perfect spot for Hartenstein to be a top 50 fantasy guy. It's not. Because obviously Shea and Williams and Holmgren are all still there. Top 100 very easily for Hartenstein. Top 70 probably. But it is not the perfect spot for him. From a fantasy production standpoint because of all the other options there. If Chet and Hartenstein play together, it probably does drop both of their rebounding numbers at least a little bit. We saw the Gobert-Towns pairing, what that did for both of their rebound numbers. It might impact block numbers. It might impact field goal percentage numbers. But who's the better three-point shooter? It's probably Chet, meaning he probably sits a little bit more on the perimeter, meaning his field goal percentage and rebounds probably do drop. Although Chet is a better interior defender, so maybe his rebound defensively and blocks stay up. It is a huge get for the Thunder. It's massive for this team. It does elevate them. Probably not title favorites. The Celtics are still there, but they're going to be right up there. At number 2, I would say very close to it, especially with Denver taking a step back. Huge move to get Isaiah Hartenstein. And then we go to the Detroit Pistons. The thick hogsman himself, Tobias Harris, is back in Detroit. 2 years, $52 million. No word of non-guarantees or options or anything on that at this point. 2 years, $52 million. Tobias Harris is 100% going to start in Detroit. He is going to play 32, 33 minutes a night, I'm guessing. He is going to... What this means is this is the end of Isaiah Stewart starting. Thank whatever deity that you give offerings to. That is over. So Stewart's the backup center, which actually impacts Jalen Duren. It limits his ceiling. But maybe Trajan Langdon is like, I'm not interested in Isaiah Stewart at all. Maybe that's someone that the Pelicans could... Although he can't protect the rim, so he wouldn't work as a center next to Zion. He's too small. But he is a perfect backup center, Stewart. That's what he is. But him starting at the 4 is done now. So what do they do with Simone Fontecchio, who's not re-signed as a restricted guy because his shooting is important? Harris can shoot okay. Like, he's a pretty good player, Tobias Harris. I know there are definite issues with him and he is older and there is a steep decline that probably will come really soon. But let's say we've got Cade locked in, Harris locked in, Duren locked in. New coach, though. Who knows what they might do? Asar Thompson, Ron Holland, Jaden Ivey, Simone Fontecchio. Only 2 of those 4 can start. And if they go like Fontecchio at the 3, with Harris 4, Duren 5, can Asar play the 2? Some of those guys are not going to have good impact. Harris is going to have a better impact, I think, than last season, pretty clearly. Because he's not in a situation where he's deferring to Maxi and Embiid, or the year before it was Maxi, Embiid, and Harden. Cade is the 1, and he's the 2, I'm guessing, the number 2 offensive option, which means that he'll go and be a solid 20 points, 2 threes, 6 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.1 steal, 0.6 block player on 48 and 80. Boring as, but solid. What is Detroit doing? Obviously, it crowds things up a lot, but it's someone who can shoot, someone who is actually a good player, and gives them a level of competency, much the way that the Rockets did with Fred VanVleet and with Dylan Brooks last year. Very, very similar. But it does impact these young guys a lot. Somebody, or at least 2 of these guys, are going to lose out in a big way in Detroit. And given it's a new coach and a new front office, that Maybe they don't care. Maybe they're not invested in Ivy. I would say that's probably true. Or maybe even Isaiah Thompson. I don't know. Or maybe even Duran or Stewart. Someone's moving. So Harris is there in Detroit. That's one Philadelphia 76er starter who is gone. The next Philadelphia 76er starter who is gone is the wave pool DeAnthony Melton, who moves to Golden State. Melton forever has been a fantasy legend, playing in Memphis, getting limited behind Dylan Brooks and guys that shouldn't have been limited behind, and then moving to Philadelphia and us being frustrated again with his minutes. But we all know that if he plays 30 minutes, he's a very clear top 100, top 80 fantasy guy. Now he goes to Golden State. 1-year deal, $12.8 million. You might look at this and go, well, it's easy. He just replaces Klay. And I go, Brandon Podziemski's going to have first crack at that, I am certain. Curry, Podziemski, Kuminga, Green, Jackson Davis would be my guess. Maybe they go back to Looney, but I would guess it's Jackson Davis, Green, Kuminga, Podziemski, Curry. Melton plays a 27-minute a night sixth man role. We all sit there going, I wish he would get more playing time. I don't really see... Look, I guess theoretically he could start over Podziemski. Theoretically they could start him with Podziemski, pushing Draymond to center. That is a very small team. Kuminga at the 4, Green at the 5. That's a very small team. Because Melton's only like 6'3" or 6'4", really long arms, but really small. We know what he does. I have a worry a little bit about his back issue, which obviously cost him a bunch of time this season. But this is not much like when he went to Philadelphia and people thought, well, this is 35 minutes a night, he's going to cook. This is not that, I don't think. I don't think it's as clear as that. I think Podziemski absolutely has both hands firmly on the job of a starter. And Melton will come in and be the sixth man, I'm guessing, the similar role that Chris Paul played last season. And then when he gets to start, we know that he goes off. Really weird that it's only a 1-year deal, but there is an opportunity here for him to do the stuff that DeAnthony Melton usually does and be that player that we all wish would play more and still is enough to be a 12-team league guy, but just doesn't push further. That's sort of how I think it might go here. Maybe. Frustrating sometimes where he's just never in that elite spot. All right. So, who's another Sixers starter? Well, Nick Batum started a bunch of games, and he's such an unbelievable old man Ricochet here, an unbelievable connective piece at his age. And he was traded to Philadelphia. There were plenty of personal issues for him during the season, which rumors have it were him and his wife being like, we don't want to be in Philadelphia, we want to be in LA. So his contract expires 6 months later and he's back in LA, shockingly. That he loves the Clippers, he loved the team, and he is back there. 2 years, $9.6 million, which will basically end his career. I would guess that with Paul George gone, they bring in Derek Jones Jr., but they bring in Batum, and Batum has a shot to start and play 26 minutes a night next to Kawhi. Maybe Jones and Batum start when Kawhi is inevitably out with another knee injury. The Clippers obviously have James Harden, but there's still a lot of stuff to happen there. Is Russell Westbrook being moved on from? Zubats is there, Kawhi is there, Harden is there. Jones, Batum, and a bunch of other guys they brought in today. They are changing over basically half of their roster, much like the Sixers. I don't think we'll need to worry about Batum too much. He's a very low scoring option, but he gets steals, blocks, threes, and assists, and that can be useful at times, but he will just be someone that they need. Doesn't give them any hope for the future, of course, but getting bodies on the wing who are capable is important. They also brought in Mo Bamba. I guess they're looking to tank. Bamba played for the Sixers. So did Batum last year. And he's bad. Sorry, he just is. He can put up good numbers at times, but he is bad. He was bad in Orlando. He was bad with the Lakers. He was bad with Philadelphia. And he's going to be bad again in LA. But he moves in there at the moment to be the backup behind Zubats. We don't know whether Daniel Tice is going to return. If Zubats misses time, which he doesn't really, if Bamba starts, then absolutely we're using for fantasy because he puts up numbers every time. They're often numbers that result in a negative 10 plus minus every game, but he blocks shots, he hits threes, he gets some rebounds, but he's not a very good on-court player. I'm going to guess this is a minimum signing. We didn't get any details on the amount of money, but he's solid enough as a backup. Solid enough. Don't get excited though. They also bring in Chris Dunn from Utah. So Utah brings in Isaiah Collier. They were using Keontae George last season. Dunn was getting minutes because he was a good defender, and he is out of there. So he heads across, I would guess, to be the Russell Westbrook-ish replacement behind James Harden. Cannot really play offense at all very well, but an elite defender. And when you're looking for steals, streaming in category leagues, that's what he brings, but that's really about it. I'm also going to guess this is a minimum deal with Dunn going to the Clippers from the Jazz. It doesn't really impact much negatively for the Jazz. All it means is it opens up more stuff for George, more stuff for Sexton. That Clarkson is still there as well. Hopefully fewer minutes for Horton Tucker, although he's a free agent too. And maybe we get Collier into that mix as well. Just opening things a little bit up there. Dunn is already 29 or 30 years of age. Really good defender. Probably will take the backup spot when Westbrook is gone, would be my guess. Speaking of good backup point guards who are elite at defense, the Bucks are very limited in what they can do, but this is an absolute W from them. Now, Delon Wright has had a million injury issues, but anytime he gets an opportunity, he plays well. He was bought out by the Wizards last year, ended up in Miami, and was pretty good. And now he heads to Milwaukee. And we know that there's Middleton, Giannis, Lopez, Dame. Last season, it was Malik Beasley, and then it was Patrick Beverley. Delon Wright's better than both of those players, I think. He's iffy at shooting, but he has had some really good percentage seasons. He's an elite defender. He's got size. He can pass. He's like if Patrick Beverley was what Patrick Beverley thinks he is. I don't think they will start right. I think it will be some way. Who knows even if Beasley is back. Won't be AJ Johnson starting. Pretty confident about that. But Wright is just good. If we find a way that he starts and plays 30 minutes, then yeah, he's a definitely draftable player. 2 steals, 4 assists, 1.4 threes. He can easily, 9 points, but he would be draftable. It's probably not going to happen, but this is as much as we can clown on the Bucks for the Adrian Griffin / Doc Rivers / draft pick fiasco, great get to get someone like Delon in and his level of defense next to Damian Lillard versus whatever it is that Malik Beasley was dishing up is a huge W. They were running with Cam Payne and Andre Jackson in that spot last season. Huge upgrade, massive upgrade, underrated signing. I guess the writing was always seen to be on the wall for Sticks, and we talked about this a lot in the Pacers season recap stuff, and even when we were talking Dynasty with Matt Lawson a couple of weeks ago, saying it feels like Isaiah Jackson's locked down the backup center spot. And so Smith opted out of his player option, and he has signed with the Bulls 3 years, $27 million. Now, it's not a huge amount of money. I wouldn't say that Smith has earned that necessarily, but there's an obvious opening at backup center with Drummond gone. Part of the issue I have with this is I'm still not sure whether Smith is a center. He started at power forward 2 years ago for the Pacers, and anytime he moved to center, he looked terrible. This season, playing at center, he was a little bit better. He's not a very good rebounder. He can shoot, though. He can block shots. And it could be an easy argument at some point later this year, honestly, with the rate that Vucevic is declining, that Smith is better. Maybe. We'll see. The Bulls, I also don't know what's going on. Is DeRozan coming back? What do they do with both Buzelis and Pat Williams? If they're going to play Smith at all at the 4, which I don't think they will, then what's the point of that? At least they're getting some extra depth because their backup center situation after Drummond was nobody, and they had no power forwards. There was nobody on that team. But Williams is back, Buzelis is there, Smith is in. It's a little bit of strength into that front court. We're not going to worry about him for most of the time in fantasy, but he was there. And this one I don't get. I know that they waived Omer Yurtseven, but John Collins still exists. They drafted Taylor Hendricks last year. They drafted Kyle Filipowski this year. They drafted Walker Kessler 2 years ago. So why are we giving Drew Eubanks anything more than the minimum? 2 years, $10 million. I know it's easy to make the jokes because it's Utah and he's white, but why? Eubanks was really quite bad last year. I thought he was pretty good for Portland the years before, but what is this? Is this portending another move? Is Kessler being moved? Is Collins out of there? Because Collins started at center for a big chunk of the year. Do they have no trust in Filipowski? Or is this... Because, again, if it was just like third-string center minimum sign, I go, no worries, whatever. Like Mo Bamba, whatever. 2 years, $10 million, though. What are we doing? Who else was bidding for Drew Eubanks' services? Indiana? Charlotte loves a white center. Maybe they could have been in on it. Who else was doing this? I don't know. I just don't really get what the point... Obviously, that's not much money. It's more like Why did you need to prioritize getting Drew Eubanks in? My answer would be you didn't. But there you go. He's there. What are you going to do about it? That, at the moment, are all the players that have changed teams. That's all that's changed teams. Let's talk about some of the re-signings. Kelly Oubre Jr. is back with the Sixers. Talked about him already. 2 years, $16.3 million with a player option. This was an absolute masterclass in being able to read and decipher media. Because we saw it last year. Remember when Shams talked about the Bradley Beal to Phoenix trade and well, Beal's going to be their point guard, and a lot of us said, no, he's not. Come on, Shams, what are you doing? Woj tweeted about Kelly Oubre signing. Yep. And he said, how did he phrase it? He said, Kelly Oubre, I'm going to go find it. Because basically what he said was just not true. He said, Kelly Oubre, Sixers starting shooting guard, is back for 2 years, $16.3 million. Okay. Oubre didn't play shooting guard. He was a small forward all season because remember they had Melton and Maxi, and then they brought in Lowry to play with Maxi. So Oubre was not their starting shooting guard ever. Right? So there's that part of it. The second part is calling him their starter or a starter level player on this bonus. Like he started 50 out of his 63 games, and he literally started those games because someone else was hurt. And when players came back, he went to the bench. He still played those 50 games, but he was a minimum contract signing, and he got a bump in that. But this is backup money again. $8 million a year. That's Najee Marshall's music. That is less than Derek Jones Jr. That is significantly less than the money that DeAnthony Melton just got paid. I do agree. I think Oubre is going to have to start, given what this team is. But just be really careful. Like the Sixers starting shooting guard is back. Wasn't a starter, wasn't a shooting guard. He's being paid reserve money. He is very clearly the fourth offensive option now, at least. We still don't know who the other starter is. And we have seen in the past what Oubre does is he can score when he's given the ball. But he never gets assists. He doesn't rebound. His steals have been high, but I don't view him as a good defender. I would have zero interest at this early stage in drafting him. He's a bad fantasy player when he's in a situation like this, and that is exactly the situation he's in. The Thunder made two big moves as well. We knew that they'd declined the team options on Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe so that they could re-sign them, and they just lent into it. 5 years, $47 million for Wiggo, and 4 years, $48 for Joe. Great value. Both of these guys are key reserve pieces. This team is locking themselves in. You might think that's a lot for Aaron Wiggins. He's really good. He saved basketball, but that's great. 4 years, $48 million for Isaiah Joe. I recorded a show today that's coming out in a week's time, looking back at the 2020 draft and the value of players using advanced metrics. And Isaiah Joe's got the 6th best Darko DPM over the entire draft class. These are good players. Luka Garza's back in Minnesota for 2 years. I have no idea on the money. Okay, so that's just like, yeah, he's fine as an emergency fourth center, whatever. Aaron Holiday, 2 years, $10 million in Houston. Man, hopefully he's never going to play. Jalen Green, Fred VanVleet, Amen Thompson, Reed Shepherd. Hopefully we never see Aaron Holiday play. Good insurance money. What about the dart, though, the big fella, Goga Badadze? 3 years, $25 million. They declined the option on Mo Wagner, so I'm not sure whether Mo is back. Goga established himself as a very strong defensive player, established himself as a starting caliber center. Is there a chance, maybe, that he begins the year as the starter over Wendell Carter? Now, we saw last year that when Wendell returned from injury, Goga went from starter to third string and didn't play. But that level of a contract, it's not a huge contract. It's bigger than Drew Eubanks' money, though. It's showing that they have some interest in having him be at least a part of an every night rotation. And I'm guessing that Goga would have had interest to be a rotation player in many different spots. So you would think there's some level of, not even guarantee, but like an assurance that, yeah, like you're going to play. We're not bringing back Wagner or whatever. So interesting stuff. Probably not going to be draftable, but he obviously showed a lot last season. We've only had one restricted guy re-sign today, and that is the predictable one of the Tyrese Maxey for the Sixers re-signing. 5 years, $204 million was always going to happen. They didn't sign him to the extension last offseason so they could keep his cap hold low so they could go ahead and sign Paul George. That's worked out pretty well. Maxey blew up. He gets the full max. I hope everyone's happy there. We talked about him at length before with the Paul George stuff. Probably some level of a hit in his overall usage, but PG can also take somewhat of a step back there too. And then we also had two, if I can find them. Where are my graphics on that? Can't find it. Lost it. Found it now. Two extensions, both in Boston, both gigantic money. Jayson Tatum, the largest contract in NBA history, 5 years, $314 million. Supermax, designated veteran extension, gets it. Is he the best player in the league? Absolutely not. Did he lead his team to a championship? Yes. Did he need to go and do everything himself? No, that's the nature of how good the team was. Fully deserved. And my man, Derek White, 4 years, $126 million extension. This team is going to get expensive. I love that they won the title. They signed these extensions. The owner said, yep, guys, anyone want to take the team and take this bill on? Good for them. Pony up the money. Shout out to Denver. And these guys deserved the deals that they got. Let's go and have a quick look to see whether any other news has broken in the 30 minutes that I've been recording this. There is not any other news. I'm sure something else will happen. There's still whispers about what the Pelicans are going to do at center and Brandon Ingram's name being bandied about. And if I go and have a look actually at the best available players that are still there to see what sort of stuff we're going to do in shows moving forward. So who hasn't agreed on deals yet? Justin Minaya is back on a two-way. And Colin Gillespie signed a two-way in Phoenix. So there you go. We don't have news on LeBron. We guess he's back with the Lakers. Gordon Hayward, DeMar DeRozan's probably the biggest one left. Bud Hield, Gary Trent, Markelle Fultz, Malik Beasley, Tyus Jones, Joe Ingles, Alec Burks. Yeah, that's where it starts to get rough. So Miles Bridges. Yeah, that's one. Isaac Okoro's restricted free agency. Who else is there? Sadiq Bey. It doesn't matter. He's not going to play this year. And a bunch of other guys. Simone Fontecchio. Bunch of other guys who don't really matter that much. Dennis Smith, maybe. Tristan Vukcevic. Just checking out Sandro Mabakalishvili. He's restricted, so he'll likely be back. Tillman, Dinwiddie. Yeah, all right, that's about it. I don't see any other names there that are super important. The big ones we're going to wait for, obviously LeBron, DeRozan, Trent, maybe. Tyus, probably getting to be, that's about it, I would say. Kyle Anderson and Miles Bridges are the other ones to see where they end up. We'll be back to recap all of that. Hopefully that wraps up tomorrow. We get some trade news and we can tie that all up in a neat little package. Thumb it up. Leave your comments down below, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.